Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is just going to be an update on the Moondrop Rays and where I would place it on my wallhack certified tier list. I want to do this video. It's going to be a short one because we've already done an unboxing. You guys can check that out if you want to see what's in the box. But most importantly, just to discuss the fundamentals here, it is a hybrid IEM. That means the Moondrop Rays has two different types of drivers. It has a dynamic driver, it has a planar driver. And the colorway here is actually fairly cool, especially if you're into that gamer-esque type vibe with the purples, chromatic type thing, and the translucent green 3D printed resin chassis. The fit overall is quite ergonomic, and it is a comfortable IEM. Even though it's on the smaller side for me, it fit actually perfectly fine. The nozzle is not that wide, it's not that long. I think this should be a very comfortable IEM for long durations of gameplay. It's lightweight and ergonomic. The chassis is translucent, even though it is a darker green color here, so you can see the internals quite nicely, which I think is always a cool vibe for IEMs. On the top side, you can see it is a 2-pin connection, but the cable is a DSP cable. It's a nice braided cable. It does tangle pretty easy, especially when you add in the extension cable here that does come in the box as well. But the reason I like the Moondrop Rays so much is because for those that are on an extreme budget, and you can see the USB-C from the DSP cable connects here to the extension cord, and then it goes USB-A into your console or your PC. The reason I like it so much is because the cable does come preloaded with a multitude of EQs. So on the web-based driver, I'll show you guys, you've got Valorant EQs, PUBG, Apex, etc. You can also EQ on your own, just a multitude of presets like the default EQ. And here, you guys need to realize, like, EQing, I never really EQ. I like to find IEMs that just work out of the box, because when you EQ, what you may gain in one area, you lose in another, and sometimes the EQ just makes things generally not sound that pleasant from a casual perspective. And to get into where I would place these on my wallhack certified tier list, I do want to start with the default tuning. I think the default tuning is well balanced, it's neutral, it sounds natural in terms of the mids, and it's got a relaxing upper region, so nothing sounds shouty. Gunfire in Apex, you don't have that harshness, that shoutiness that some IEMs can have. And overall, it's just a pleasant, neutral, and fairly natural sounding IEM. The bass it's not a bass head IEM. You're not going to get this massive rumble on the low end. You're not going to get this massive amount of punch. But the bass does sound pretty nice in terms of its overall technicality. It's pretty quick, doesn't leave a lot of bloat, which are things that translate well into a gaming perspective. So the default tuning on the DSP cable is different than the analog, and you can see it here on their own website on the web-based driver. But the default tuning analog I just didn't quite like as much as the DSP tuning. So I'll talk about the DSP tuning with the cable. And again, I do want to iterate that the cable's nice because you don't need a sound card. It's just plug and play. You don't need an amp DAC. So anybody on an extreme budget, again, it's a nice thing to have here. The cable also translates over for multitude amounts of devices, your iPhone, your tablet, your console, your PC, etc. So it's a nice option, which is why I like it so much. Now, the Moondrop Rays, getting into the default DSP tuning, I like it a lot for Valorant. I think Valorant is its best game here. Things do sound really nice in terms of imaging, and this level of emphasis when not a lot's going on, you do feel that nice draw when people are behind walls and they're inching forward, and they're about to peek. You get that nice amount of draw. When you're shooting or other things are going on, like abilities, you still get this great amount of separation and good layering to be able to hear multiple things going on and pick it up around the map. But I did notice on the default tuning, there's a bit of a drop-off in terms of the emphasis and urgency on audio cues. So it's not that the soundstage is this broad, expansive stage. It's just things feel a little bit thinner the further you go. And things, of course, closer to you, you've got a decent amount of emphasis there. But when things are happening close to you, the other things fall off at a distance. So there's a bit of a separation hit and it's harder to pay attention to people who may be getting an angle on you at a distance or people coming behind you when you're focused on something else that's closer to you. So that detracts from my overall score. Overall, though, again, the imaging is quite good. The tuning sounds great. The default tuning sounds great. The only thing I did on the EQ was I raised everything between 1 and 1.5 dB across the board on the EQ, just making things a little bit more elevated across the board. And overall, that did seem to help a little bit. I do need to emphasize here that because it's through the DSP cable, when you're at 100% volume, there's no going over. And things do feel just a little bit low in Apex as well as Call of Duty. I wish I could just amp it up a little bit and get some more juice out of these with the DSP cable, which also does have a microphone, I should mention as well. When we are in Valorant, I would say like the default tuning and with my changes on the EQ, just raising everything 1.5 dB across the board, I would give it a B in Valorant to a B-. And the B- is in the scenarios where you're actually in a 5v5 situation. You've got multiple people pushing in, abilities going off, etc. Again, it just becomes a little bit more hard and muddy to pick up that accuracy in the hits, the accuracy in the depth perception of the audio cues, particularly the ones at a distance. But good for a out-of-the-box, nothing else necessary option for Valorant. When we get to Apex Legends, and actually, while we're on Valorant, just because there are EQ profiles on certain IEMs and certain things, it doesn't mean those EQ profiles are better for those particular titles. In Valorant, with the Valorant EQ, I noticed that things just sounded naturally from a casual perspective worse. Things sound thin, nasally, gunfire is elevated from your perspective as well as around the map. So although I might be getting targeted hits at an elevated level with gunfire around the map, it just doesn't translate into anything that is more helpful than the default EQ. I think it actually detracts more from the experience going to the Valorant EQ, particularly when you're shooting. It raises your gunfire too loud, making it more occlusive than the default EQ. So I prefer the default EQ, particularly from both a just casual listening experience. The tuning sounds better and more natural, and it's also better for a gaming experience in those areas. When we move to Apex Legends, and I'll just get into Apex and not much else in this little update, but Apex Legends is a different beast entirely. I do think they sound good in Apex from a different things that we look for, including separation, layering, depth perception, etc. But it's kind of the same thing. When you get into Apex, that fall off is just a little bit too much. And in Apex, there's more going on than there is in Valorant, in third parties, fourth parties, etc. So it does become hard and too hard to pick up on the audio cues that are happening around you. Even in a 1v1, the gunfire does detract from the experience more than it does in Valorant. So if I'm in a 1v1 and somebody's coming up behind me, about to open the door, etc., it just becomes too straining on you to pick up on those footsteps. It's just not something that hits with the emphasis and that urgency that we look for. The occlusion in third parties becomes a little bit much. You don't really begin to pick up on a lot of things, so it struggles there, and particularly with layering, when there's multiple gunfires going on of the same weapon type around you, it just becomes very difficult to pick up on those slides, those climbs, those steps, things like that. I would say like general imaging is good, but depth perception does become a little bit hard. It's obviously easy to tell when people are fighting at a distance, but it's not something that's hitting as well as other IEMs for Apex in particular. When you go to the Apex EQ, I just don't find it helpful at all. Again, gunfire becomes a little bit more elevated, but it just becomes more of an issue of everything else, separation, layering, etc., when you are shooting, and I just don't find it, again, that helpful. I think just going to the default EQ, boosting everything by 1 dB in Apex across the board was the best experience I had for Apex. I would give it a B- in Apex. I think that I can't give it a B because of that thinness within the space. Again, things fall off too much, and in Apex with more going on than in Valorant, it does feel worse than in Val. Even when I'm popping a battery, for instance, with that elevation and then the thinness of everything around me, it just detracts from the experience to a great extent. But I need to emphasize that when something falls into the, let's say, B range in Valorant or a B- in Apex, these things are still quite good from a competitive perspective in those titles. The default EQ, I think, sounds good and clean in both titles. And for its respective price point, being able to use it on different devices and being able to just plug and play, not need an amp DAC, I just think it's a solid option for a multitude of reasons for competitive gaming. In Call of Duty, because of that thinness within the space and that fall off, the occlusion when there's too much going on, I do think that it's a little bit worse and probably the worst in Call of Duty out of the other two titles, but I still think it handles fairly well. But it's, to me, hovering around like that B- to C+ range. In Call of Duty, I'm really looking for like forward hitting mid base where people knocking through doors is really coming through elevated and clean. I feel like if it had a little bit more juice out of the set through the DSP cable, it would probably be a little bit better because things do sound clean. Like when there's airstrikes going off, mortar strikes, I don't feel that to be that occlusive in Call of Duty. I just wish things rang through with more emphasis and less thinness within the space in general. But a clean sounding set, when there's not a lot going on, it's fairly easy to pick up on where people are within the space. The general imaging on the set is actually quite good. It's not a bass head IEM. It's not, obviously you can EQ it to your liking, but not a bass head IEM that is going to, you're not going to feel this massive amount of rumble. Everything just sounds quite clean and neutral on this set, which I do enjoy. Again, the upper region, there's no shoutiness, no fatigue that I had on the set with the default tuning on the DSP cable, which is always something that's, I think, quite important. You don't want to be in Apex and just developing a headache because of the default tuning on any of these IEMs. So I do think the Moondrop Rays are in a good level, and I think there is multiple compelling reasons to buy the Moondrop Rays, particularly if you're not going to be spending money on amp DACs and you just want to have a one-and-done option. Again, the microphone does work as well. It does get recognized on your PC just directly through the DSP cable, so that's a nice thing as well if you need it. And the mic quality is just what you would expect from like an Apple cable of a similar, what you see on TikTok videos and stuff. When you do raise this closer to your mouth, it comes through a lot cleaner. But when you have it just resting down, it just sounds like you're kind of far away from the mic. I will give you guys a little sound test here, just so we have it in the video for you guys. This is the microphone hanging down to my chest. And this is me speaking directly into the microphone. Something that obviously is not going to be at the quality of, let's say, an XLR or a good USB microphone, which is what I use for my YouTube videos and while I am playing games. But again, if you're on a very tight budget, plug and play, comes with the microphone on the cable, and overall, it's a nice fitting IEM. So on my list, guys, I am going to be putting the Moondrop Rays at a B-. And depending on the title, in the little description, you'll see it could go up to a B in Val, or it could go to a C+ in something like Call of Duty. That's going to be it for this one, guys. I hope the update helped. I really do like it. And again, if you need something like this, it is a solid option for gaming. I hope it helped, guys. If it did, please leave a sub to the channel. See you guys in the next review. Peace.